When did a feeling of, we need to get out of here immediately, save you? I was getting a drink with a friend and he brought along his friend. When we left, I felt very intoxicated despite only having 2 drinks. They wanted me to come to their hotel as they were getting ready to go to a concert that night, but I made the excuse that I needed to get home because I think I left my oven on. My drink was 100% tampered with. My vision felt like I was in a tunnel. I got home in an Uber and immediately retched and continued to do so for the rest of the night. 2 drinks and a tunnel vision experience? Sounds like they were serving special edition beers. That was a very big bullet dodged. I'm glad you're okay. Story 2. I made a somewhat late-night trip to a convenience store that I knew carried wine. I used to work really odd hours, and sometimes late at night I'd finish my work and want to have a few drinks. As I was getting back in my truck, this young girl asked if I could give her a ride a few blocks back to her home. It was probably a bad idea to judge a book by its cover, but she was pretty young and dressed decently. Didn't act too weird or anything, so I figured okay. Well, I'm heading back and we get into a pretty rough part of town and she says turn left up here. Very dark street. Whatever. I stop and she says she really appreciated the ride and wanted to do something for me. Asked if she could give me a whistle. I decline and start getting sketched out, like she needs to get out now. She gets out and closes the door, and as I drive away, 2 men dressed in dark clothing were just stepping towards the street and stared at me as I drove past. Pretty sure that would have ended with a weapon in my face. That's what you get for being nice sometimes. Story 3. Not my feeling, but whatever. It was at the Goose Fair in Nottingham in the early 2000s. I was there taking pictures for my art course, and my boyfriend at the time fancied himself as a bit of a hard man. Liked to make out he was trained or whatever. Anyway, after about 20 minutes, he made me leave. Said that crap was about to go down. Huge eye roll. Whatever, dude. Okay, we'll leave. I see in the news the next day that a 14-year-old girl was terminated there not long after we left. Story 4. My friend and I had just seen a midnight movie. It was about 2:30 a.m. when I pulled into a gas station to grab a Yoo-hoo. I grabbed the bottle, turned around, and saw 3 men enter the store together. One waited by their doors, one stood near the register, looking at chips, and the third was crouched down with his back to the employee door so the cashier wouldn't see him through the square window in the door. They all look at me at once and then try to ignore me, acting like they're just casually positioned around the cashier and door. I walk up, put my Yoo-hoo on the counter. The cashier turns the scanner and basically tells me with his eyes, "You do it." I ring myself up, drop money on the counter, and walk as normally as I could past the man by the door and out to my car, what seemed like the furthest pump from the store. I sit down, throw my Yoo-hoo at my buddy, and hit the emergency button in my car that calls 911. I connect with dispatch and report a possible robbery. A mile or 2 later, I see a cop car flying down the street in the direction we just came. I called non-emergency the next day to ask what happened, and they said the men fled after I left, and the cashier told the police he knew he was about to get robbed too, and to thank me for calling the police. That felt good. What didn't feel good was my buddy and all his nervousness about what was unfolding as he was listening to me recount everything to dispatch. Thought I just gave him a random Yoo-hoo and chugged that thing down like a starving infant with a bottle. Story 5. We were hiking and geocaching up in North Michigan, where it's pretty rednecky in spots. We were at a designated trail with a small parking lot off on some weird side road, but we decided to check it out anyway. About 5 minutes into the trail, we noticed a game camera, but there was no ID on it. Game cameras on public land need to have ID info. We thought that was really strange. We kept walking a bit, but I just didn't feel right about the camera or walking in this trail, so we turned around and went back to the truck instead of walking the last mile of the trail. When we got back to the truck, this speeder pulled up with a couple in it. The guy was just a regular redneck, but the girl in his passenger seat 100% had the nod and was struggling to keep her head up. They looked surprised when we walked out of the trail and they sat in the lot for a second and then left. Pretty sure they weren't looking to go for a hike. My guess is that it was their camera and they get the notifications when people are on the trail so they can break into their cars. It happened to us on a family trip in Kentucky years ago, so maybe I'm just a little suspicious, but we decided no more backwoods hidden nature trails for us. Story 6. A couple of years ago, I was walking home from the bar at 1 a.m. I'm a young woman in her 20s, so this was instantly stupid, but I wanted to save money avoiding an Uber and was also intoxicated, so I wasn't thinking straight. I'm walking down a main but dark street, and then a pickup truck driving by slows down next to me. 2 men look at me, and the passenger asks, "Hey, do you need a ride somewhere?" I lie and say no thanks because I'm expecting one in a moment. They said, all right, and drove off. I watched them drive down the street, and then a ways down, I saw their brake lights light up. There's no stop sign or stoplight, so I just assumed the worst and thought, I've got to get out of here. I ran into a tiny parking lot to my right and hid behind an outdoor vending machine. Moments later, the 2 men pulled into the lot and circled it, clearly looking for me. They couldn't find me, they drove away. I waited a few moments until I decided to call an Uber. Story 7. Up in the woods about 2 a.m., having a very large bonfire in midwinter. There were probably 7 or 8 feet of snow where it wasn't packed, and my friend and I were the only two sober. After about 45 minutes, we both looked at each other at the same time and went, "Something is wrong." Neither of us could quite explain it because we hadn't seen anything, but we knew there were animals in the woods. Grizzlies, wolves, and bobcats are all known to be there, but generally leave larger groups and fires alone. We managed to convince the roughly 15 intoxicated guys to head back to the trucks a mile away, as a group, knowing that at least the sober friend had a weapon on her and could use it. We got everyone into vehicles and everyone shipped back to town eventually. The guys who didn't believe us went back out in the morning to check that everything was cleaned up and found the tracks of a pack of wolves that had been circling the clearing. Story 8. I was about 11 or 12 years old at a neighbor's house. The sun had already set. It wasn't completely dark yet, but it was close and there was less light by the second. We were sitting on the lawn because we loved watching the sky turn from day to night, just talking and giggling and carrying on as little girls do. A truck drove up our street. Slower than usual, but not suspiciously slow. Still, I felt my guts sink for some reason I didn't understand. A couple minutes later, it passed by again, and then again after another few minutes, though not quite as slow this time. I was 100% positive it was the same truck, so I watched it drive away and noticed it started slowing down. I told her to get up, and when the truck made another U-turn and started heading towards us again, I told her to run and hide. I don't know if she realized what she was hiding from, but we ended up splitting in two directions. She dove behind a bush, and I crouched behind an old car parked in their driveway. We could see each other, and I had a clear shot to the door if I needed to dart in to get a parent, but we heard the truck roll up and stop in front of her house. Someone got out of the truck and started calling for us. I honestly don't remember what they were asking, though. We just kept our eyes locked and tried to stay as still and quiet as possible. Probably should have screamed, but I think we were both too scared. The person eventually got in their car and took off. We stayed hidden for what felt like forever, eyes locked until we finally felt safe enough to run inside. I don't know what would have happened if I didn't notice something and we booked it, or if that person was actually dangerous or not, but I'm glad that I'll never find out. Story 9. When I was 17, I used to go jogging early in the mornings. My then boyfriend lived about 7 blocks down the road, so I jogged to his house, then we'd loop around a park together before heading back to our respective homes. I started noticing a guy sitting in his car in the park, watching us run. After a week of this, I'd seen the same guy along my jogging route, close to my house, in addition to him being at the park. He'd sit in his car and watch me run, drive to the park, then watch me some more. My boyfriend thought I was being paranoid about it all. One morning, it was really foggy out. I started to cross the street, and as I was almost across, someone turned their headlights on bright and it blinded me. Instead of going forward, I stopped and started walking backwards, towards my house. As my eyes adjusted, I could see that the man who'd been watching me was standing next to his car with the trunk popped open. I noped out of there and went home. I never jogged there again. I reported it to the police. My boyfriend's stepdad insisted, but they didn't seem to care. 2 years later, a 16-year-old girl was taken, then driven out of the countryside. By the description of the man in the car, I knew it was done by the same guy who watched me jog. I never caught him. Story 10. I used to go to a local gay bar, but was not of age. The bartenders and bouncers let me in as long as I didn't try to drink any alcohol. I ordered a Sprite one night and saw a shady dude pull his hand away quickly when I had my back turned. Having a sketchy feeling, I took a small sip and decided not to risk drinking the rest, so I left it at the bar. About 30 minutes later, I felt like I was underwater and could barely keep my head up. Someone close to my age noticed and walked me home, about an hour walk, propping me up. He sat with me on my front steps and rubbed my back, platonically, for another 2 hours until daylight, making sure I was okay. His name was Billy, and I never got to see the guy who saved me ever again. Something very bad could have happened if it weren't for him. I still think about him. Imagine the bar's slogan: come for the questionable drinks, stay for the unexpected acts of kindness, and also don't trust anyone. Story 11. This was back in 2019. I was in college, and there was a really nice guy in one of my classes. A week or two in, we had to work together on a small project, and I was pretty excited about the opportunity to get to know him. After speaking to him, though, I got a really bad vibe from him, but nothing specific that I could put my finger on. I lost all attraction to him and knew that I should keep my distance. He approached me a couple of times after the project, but I made sure to be pretty cool or distant, though still polite. A month or two later, same semester, our professor, Mr. Baldwin, announced that the guy had been arrested for terminating a girl he had been dating, another student in our college. He gave us the number of the detective investigating the case in case we had any info to share. Story 12. This story is thanks to Mom's intuition. When my brother and I were young, maybe 10 and 7 respectively, our family was spending some time over the summer with my aunt in Central Florida. My mom had taken us for a trip to a super Walmart, and we came out with a shopping cart completely full of stuff for the couple weeks we were planning to be there. My brother and I were goofing around on our walk back to the van while my mom navigated the cart, when suddenly she said, "Get to the car, now," in a tone of voice that I hadn't quite heard before, which warranted zero argument from us kids. We quickly crossed the concrete median between parking aisles. We were one over as she unlocked the van for us to get in. We waited as she caught up a few seconds later and loaded everything herself and got in. She called her dad on her Nextel, lol. Immediately, she peeled out and told him that she noticed a particular car with two men in it pass by us when we were initially walking toward or into the store, which for some reason gave her very bad vibes. And sure enough, they had waited and began following us down the lot as we exited the store with a giant car full of stuff and headed to our vehicle. My dad then called the police in the store to let them know. Lo and behold, some days later, two guys with that same car had been arrested for attempting mugging at that exact Walmart after multiple calls to the police had been made. Only as an adult did I realize the adrenaline rush my mother had to have experienced in order to physically pick up that shopping cart outright to bring it across the median as quickly as she did, instead of having us walk to the next cart opening in the median or walk all the way to the end of the aisle and come back with those guys following in their car. Who's to say what would have happened? It was plain daylight and quite busy in the parking lot. But one thing is for sure. Mothers don't mess around when their intuition kicks in. Story 13. Decided to have a look at a covered stream that hadn't been down before. We weren't expecting it to be much, so no safety call out, weather check, or even bother to let anyone know where the entrance is. Get about 750 meters in and my buddy notices a load of water pouring in up ahead. We look at each other and go, "We need to get out now." In under 5 minutes, the water went from ankle deep and manageable to knee deep and almost pushing us over. We reached a section with some steps, a ladder, and a handrail for inspection. We managed to push the lid off with the water getting deeper every minute. If that ladder had been 10 meters further, we might not have made it. If we'd have slipped, gone. When we got out, it was raining gently. We were soaking wet and just looked at each other with that, "oh crap" look. A bit more above ground exploring and we worked out that the culvert went under a local canal. If we'd have slipped, we'd have ended up in a sump under a canal, and likely never made it out. Nobody knew where we were, what was happening, or how to find us. A combination of stupidity and stupid good luck, I guess. Story 14. Not a get out of here, but a can't leave this like this moment. My girlfriend and I just picked up a bunch of metal fence posts and stacked them in the back of her car. As we neared being done, I had a flash of panic, realizing that the points were aimed right at us if we got in an accident. On the way home, we hit construction. We stopped at the giant flashing traffic light. The guy behind us didn't. We got rear-ended by an SUV doing 60 plus. I instantly had that same flash of panic and looked over at my girlfriend. She was fine. I looked down. I'm fine. Looked in the back. The fence posts are firmly wedged into the sides of the car after being slammed forward by the rear end crumpling. Story 15. Took my friend out for a drink. The first time she'd been out since having her daughter 12 weeks earlier. Had her round and went to the restroom. Came back to find her having drinks at a table with this random dude. Random dude looked at me and I felt flayed alive. Nothing in his eyes but malice. I grabbed my friend's hand, said loudly, "We're leaving now." I left immediately. I went back the next day to pay the tab we walked out on, and the bartender told me that the same man was arrested for attacking a woman outside of the bar. Story 16. I was walking home from 6th form one day and saw a car following me along the street. I was about 17. Got a really bad feeling, so I hopped in the next bus with a plan to change directions and head home at the bus depot down the road. On the bus, I got a text from a guy who'd stalked me for years on and off with a picture of my school taken just then, and the names and addresses of two of my friends. I freaked. Finally told my parents what was happening, reported it to the police. He'd driven over 100 miles to try and grab me and my friend and had just missed us because I hopped in the bus and she had gone home early. He got 2.5 years in prison suspended with orders not to contact any of the girls involved. Immediately broke that order and got another 5 years on top. I'm really glad I got that bus. Story 17. Me and some friends were in downtown Vancouver watching Game 7, Stanley Cup Finals, at a pub. Vancouver lost and things on the street got a bit rowdy. My friend wanted to stay and wait for things to calm down, but I just had a bad feeling and said we should hop on the next bus to Kitsilano. On the way over the bridge, I looked back and saw trails of smoke from burning cars coming from the city. A huge riot ensued and it was absolute anarchy all night. They shut down transit shortly after we arrived home. Story 18. My college roommate wanted to go to a hangout. I immediately knew something bad would happen and I wouldn't let her go by herself, using the excuse that I would drive her so she wouldn't have to go into the city on her own and then not be able to get home. We got there, we're the only girls. She smoked some grass and I had a beer, and she's completely on her back. She was a lightweight and crossfading does that. I, on the other hand, was approached by 3 different guys trying to convince me to drink or asking if I had a boyfriend or whatever. While the third one is talking to me, I see another guy go over and get a beer for me. I've already said I don't like beer, I'm driving, I'm not drinking, but but he hands it to me and I'm just gonna have one sip to get them off my back. Screw top of the beer that should have been closed was already open. I pretended to take a sip and then set it down. The guy I'm talking to asks if I'm gonna drink more. I say no. Within 3 minutes, I had dragged my friend out of the house and had threatened one of the guys with my keys if he didn't get out of my way and let me into my car. If you're enjoying the video, don't forget to hit that subscribe and like button for more videos like this. Story 19. In high school, at a very shady friend's house, playing cards in the kitchen, one of the house residents comes running through and out the back door holding several illegal items. He's followed by the two roommates also carrying evidence with them, with two cops hot on their heels. The cops chase the roommates out the back door, but one cop stops briefly and tells all of us at the table, "Don't move," before heading out the back door. We're all stunned and look around for a couple seconds before all four of us, without a word being spoken, jump up and run out the front door to a neighbor's where we lay low for like 3 hours until all the noise passes. Story 20. This is one of those strange events, and I just put it down to pure luck more than anything else. A few of my friends were leaving a house party one night. This was ages ago when I was in my early 20s. We were all on the road just having fun. Some of us were inebriated and some of us were just high on life. I suddenly got an urge to get off the middle of the road. This is a narrowish one-lane aside road for apparently no reason. I am about 220 pounds at 5'8", physically pushed 3 girls off the road with my arms spread and got to the grass bank on the side of the road. The girls were just about to start complaining about me manhandling them when an idiot teenage driver sped past us in a decked-out cheap sports car. We would all have been mowed down if I didn't push everyone off the road. I wish the story ended there. Not even 5 minutes after he went past us, the driver of that car had swerved to avoid a stray dog on the road and crashed at around 80 miles per hour into a stone wall. He was apparently 15. The minimum driving age in my country is 18 and was the son of a millionaire. I bet the dog was just sitting there like, man, I just wanted to cross the road and now I'm a plot device in a near tragedy turned ironic justice story. And the dog was right. Story 21. I've had a few, but one of the most prevalent that comes to mind is when my older sister and I were kids. I was 8 and she was either 10 or had just turned 11. My dad had just bought a new house that wasn't finished being built yet, so we were staying at my grandpa's house for about a month while our new house was being constructed. My sister and I were playing outside when I saw this weird van pull around the corner. I'd been taught about creepy white vans in school, so when I saw it, I paid attention and took in the details. Everything except the windshield was tinted. The driver saw us and started to speed up, and I just told my sister we needed to get inside. Right as my sister got up, I looked back at the van and saw a guy open the sliding door and stare straight at us. We made it inside and locked the door. I peeked through the window and saw the van go slowly by while the guy who opened the side door was scanning the yard. I told my mom when she got home about an hour later, and while she said we were right to play it safe, and we always should, I hear her tell my dad later that it was probably nothing and we let our imaginations scare us. It was a new place in a neighborhood we weren't comfortable in, so that must be it, according to my mom. The next morning, my grandpa woke me and my sister up and told us that there were cops down the street and that the little girl had been taken. And the police wanted us to tell them about the van we saw. Security cameras from a couple houses down saw the van too, and my grandparents' next-door neighbor also had security cameras that showed the van drive by with the side door open and a guy hanging out and looking in our yard. We moved into our new house before we got an update, but my grandpa went to church with a couple whose daughter was abducted. The van was found, along with the clothes the daughter had been wearing. If we hadn't trusted my gut, it would have been my sister and I. Story 22. I was in a bus in Romford, UK, and this guy was wasted, talking to everyone and being weird. My mates had a feeling things were getting dangerous, but I didn't feel it. We got off. Here's where the story goes bad, because at 18, I was an idiot. As the bus pulled away, I shouted something dumb at it. The bus was moving, and suddenly the fire exit door at the back of the bus flew open and the guy rolled out the door, hit the ground, and started running towards us, holding something. I can't remember if it was anything dangerous or if it just looked dangerous in his hand, all red-faced and angry. We scattered in different directions. I joined a queue to pretend I was going into a club. Some guys went down an alleyway. The guy went around the street shouting for us, me, to come out and face him, and even approach the queue I was in, searching it like something out of Jurassic Park. I kept quiet, and after what seemed like forever, he turned and walked off down the road towards where the bus had been to see if we were there. All of my friends were understandably furious with me when we caught up at our destination. The two that went down the alleyway were convinced he was going to end them if he found them. Nearly 20 years on, they still rib me about my lack of awareness and how ridiculously dumb I was. We got very lucky. Story 23. My mom's bad feeling might have saved me as an infant. She was walking with me in a stroller down her suburban neighborhood street. She says she started to feel a tingling feeling like she was being watched. So she decided to turn around and head back home. A few streets later, she noticed a car driving slowly behind her. The driver, a man, staring at her and me. She starts walking a bit faster and notices he drives a bit faster to keep up, so she gets really scared. Before she can start running, this is the 90s and she didn't have a cell phone, he rolls down the window and tells her not to run or stop because she's being stalked by a coyote. He saw her safely to her doorstep and then pointed out the coyote, who had followed us half a mile and looked rangy and desperate. It had been slipping from brush to brush looking for an opening. So glad for her intuition and the stranger's help. Story 24. I had passed Amy Bishop, UAH, a biology professor, on the third floor on her way to the faculty meeting where she ended 3 of her professors and attempted to end more, as well as herself. She had always seemed weird and gave me chills. I was on my way out of the building, collected my things on the first floor from a previous lecture, and drove home to my apartment. I missed several calls in the short drive. Having missed so many, the first I returned was to my mom, who was hysterical. She just kept saying, "You're alive, you're alive." I was bemused by what she meant. I said, "Should I not be?" And that's when I learned people had been trying to check on my location due to the happening. Story 25. Well, I was on my first solo road trip to the US when I was around 34. Male, straight. Stayed in a fairly remote Texan campsite and decided to go for a little trek, ending up hitting a Park Bay. It's about 4 or 5 p.m. and nobody else is around. Then some guy in his mid-40s rolls up in a van, starts talking. All seemed normal enough until he asked if I wanted to go for a ride and smoke with him. Politely declined. Then he said a bug went down my top. Without realizing, I lifted it, and he then commented on having nice chest hair. Said I needed to get back to my group and started walking in the opposite direction. Dude then starts reversing and getting a bit aggressive and insisting we go for a ride. I just go straight back to the trail and started running. No idea if he was just some strange friendly guy, a potential criminal, or if I accidentally stumbled into a meetup place for gay men. Glad I didn't stick around to find out anyway. Story 26. When I was 14 or 15, we had a class trip to a well-known beach a couple of states away for a long weekend. One night I was walking with 3 other girls down the main part of the city and a man approached us. Asked if we liked tattoos. We all said yes, and that we would love to get one, but that we weren't told enough. He said, "Oh, we won't worry about that. My guys do tats for anybody, as long as you don't tell on us." And dropped a wink. That's when I started feeling a little leery. He led us down an alley to a little hole in the wall with a big metal door. When he opened the door, there were about 5 guys in there with no light except for a little red light. My whole being said, "Get the heck out now." I screamed, "Run," and I ran until I got back to the hotel. I'm ashamed I never even looked for the other girls until the next day. A few days later, our class was shown a newspaper article that showed the guy that approached us along with several other men. They were arrested in connection with the trafficking ring. Our 14 to 15-year-old selves were almost trafficked. Story 27. My dad used to know really unpleasant guys. Well, he never did anything. He once told me about this one time when he would sell grass and other light substances. One guy didn't have all the money to pay him, but had something better to more than make up for the difference. They were at an island party during spring break, so they were at a hotel selling to the rich white kids. We're Hispanic. My dad followed him thinking it would be other kinds of substances he could sell. The guy leads him to a room where there's a passed-out girl. The guy says it's his girlfriend's friend and that she wouldn't remember a thing. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge. My dad turns around and screams at the guy. Give him the grass, and then calls some of his friends over to let them know there's a white guy trying to sell a girl for things. So my dad and his friends then stay in that area, keeping an eye on her to make sure he doesn't do the same thing with anyone else. Because of this, he always likes to teach me things just in case, like the classic keys in between each finger for a stabby punch. Keeping your hand over the top of your drink and not at the base. Listening to how insistent someone is about me drinking, etc. Story 28. When I first got my car when I was about 16 and incredibly naive. I'd gone to the local Walmart where a random guy had asked me for a ride. Now I'm not too keen on giving strangers rides, but he somehow convinced me to take him back to his house, which was on my way to my route anyway. I had this sinking feeling in my gut the entire time he was riding with me. When we finally got to his house, he said, "Don't move. I'll be right back with $40 for the ride." I don't know what made me panic, but I caught a whole wave of "screw this" in my gut. I hopped the curb in order to get out of the parking lot ASAP, and when I got about 200 or so feet away, I saw the dude in my rear view running outside with a weapon. Story 29. My dad is a truck driver and has always told me if you're on the interstate near a semi and smell burnt rubber, get away from them because they're about to blow a tire. One day, while driving to work, I smelled burnt rubber. There was a semi next to me, so I sped up to get ahead of him. Next thing I know, I see a huge crash in my rear view with one car going airborne and flipping. I called 911 and then watched the news and papers the rest of the day. Thankfully, no fatalities, but it was nasty. The semi blew a tire, and the car next to it in the middle lane swerved to avoid the tire fragment and hit the car in the far lane, causing it to flip. I would have been right in the middle of it all. Story 30. Somewhat of the opposite, but this was over 15 years ago. I believe 2001 or 2002. My aunt had driven from Atlanta to pick me up for a week-long visit with my cousins. Everything seemed okay, though before we really got on the road, I begged her to stop at this gas station that still had full service. I was only about 13 at the time, but I really wanted to stop. It started to rain really hard while we were there, and I begged her to stay until she could see the road better. It only rained for about 6 to 7 minutes, and we were on our way. About 10 miles up the road, we hit the small town of Abbeville, AL. We saw smoke in the air, which alerted us to slow down. We pulled up to the only major intersection of the town to see it was completely leveled. There were road guards wrapped perfectly around trees. A long-standing factory was now reduced to rubble. Gas stations were gone, as well as the high school. We called 911. The dispatcher had us sit tight and look for anyone in trouble. She informed us that about 10 minutes prior to our call, a tornado had run through and torn the town apart. What's scary to me was that there was no alarm or siren. The fact that we had made it there before any EMS always stuck with me because it could have been us, too. Story 31. I got my wisdom teeth pulled when I was 17. My mother didn't bother to pick me up, so I had to wait for the bus. Something felt wrong. My head was fuzzy and I couldn't focus. After about 10 minutes, a group of 3 guys walked up to me and started trying to convince me to leave with them. I couldn't talk, and they started grabbing at my arms and pulling me gently towards the shopping mall garage nearby. I think they thought I was intoxicated and that they could just ease me out of sight. On a Tuesday, that place was deserted. Up to this point, they had been nice but insistent. I finally said no. They got freaked out and let me go, and like a newborn giraffe, I bolted back to the dentist's office. The nurse called the police for me, and it turns out those guys were suspected in the area for mugging and mistreating intoxicated women trying to get on the bus. Trying to get on at the bus depot at the mall. My dentist made it an official policy that nobody leaves after anesthesia without an escort after that. My mother was mad when the police called her and asked her to pick me up, but that's a story for another day. Story 32. My buddy and I snuck out when we were about 14, roughly 10 a night. We went out to check out this little field by my house, all surrounded by trees and had a little creek running through it. I really wanted to see it lit up by nothing but starlight. About 1/4 of a mile away, I got the feeling of imminent dread. I gotta turn around, dude. I got a bad feeling. Oh, come on, Face McGee. You're just scared. Dude, I'm telling you, you can go there, but I'm turning around right now. All right, fine, wuss, he replied. The next day, we found out there was a mountain lion attack that ended a dude's 2 dogs who was walking. Where was it? About 1/4 a mile away from the field. When was it? About 10:30, roughly 15 minutes after we bugged out of the area. I have no doubt my subconscious recognized a big problem that I hadn't consciously noticed. Story 33. Greyhound left me in Santa Ana at 3 a.m. and told me to wait for hours alone for the next bus. Normally, I'm very selective when I call Ubers, but for some reason, something told me I needed to leave right away. I find out my hotel is only about 15 minutes away. Wow, a 4-hour wait. So I called an Uber. The Uber driver picks me up. I get in the car and tell him something along the lines of, man, they wanted me to wait 4 hours and the station is closed. What the heck? He says he's glad I called him instead of waiting for the next bus. I ask why. He says it's a dangerous area, and a few weeks ago, another girl decided to wait for the next bus and they robbed her. Nobody found her until the station opened up again the next day. Now I always travel with pepper spray. Story 34. I'm 19, buying grass with a friend. We go to some seedy apartment in the Bronx for the third guy. Third guy wasn't really my friend, kinda like a childhood bully. We get to the building and walk up a few flights, and there's 3 guys in the stairwell smoking. These are our dealers. I'm uncomfortable as heck. One of the guys tells me to stop being such a little wuss. Third guy chimes in and says if I'm going to be a little wuss, I can leave. So I leave. Friend came with me. Days later, we find out the guys jumped the third guy. Took his wallet and phone, beat him up pretty bad. Needed his jaw wired for a few months. I'm a little wuss, but I still have my phone and teeth. Story 35. Not me, but when my mom was a teenager, she started to date this older guy that my grandma had a really bad feeling about. Not just a I don't like that boy for you thing, but a stay away from him, something's wrong feeling. She tells her not to see him, forbids her, prevents her from going over to his house. One night she sneaks out and goes to meet him. He said it was really important that he see her that night. She gets to his house later, swarmed with cops. She found out he was luring young women to his house and terminating them. I would say she learned her lesson, but my mom's a sweet soul. She's too trusting and gullible because I think she sees the good in people. Luckily, nothing like that has happened again, though. Story 36. A few weeks ago, I was in the metro with my friends and brother. We were going to a park to enjoy the nice weather. We rode the train for one station, and the train stops waiting for passengers. 10 seconds later, around 50 or so football supporters who were running from the police entered the train. They're screaming, laughing, mocking, and insulting at someone outside the train. We couldn't see who. The doors were supposed to close. They didn't. I swear to God, it felt like minutes. But 5 seconds later, the train gets surrounded by police forces, dressed in black armor and armed with batons and tear gas. I'm in horror. I look at my friends. It felt like 1 minute. 1 minute with my mind racing. Many thoughts came to mind. But it was just a few seconds. I heard her run and ran like heck. I didn't look back. So a few hours go by and I look at the news. These cops were pulling football supporters out, throwing them and them. Seconds after I ran from the train. While in there, I didn't see anything, but looking at the news, it was a horrific show of fighting. I swear it felt like minutes, but my friends told me it was 10 seconds max. Story 37. My then teenage son was hanging with a bad crowd. The overprivileged, undersupervised. They were up to no good. I suspected and I worried about him. Split custody and different parenting styles made it impossible to completely curtail his association with the group. After most of a year, my son suddenly began pulling back from these guys. No reason given, just cold turkey. A month later, his buddies were arrested for shoplifting. Cops searched the car and found substances and automatic weapons. Son saw where this was heading and pulled back in time. He's now a veterinarian and has a wife and a toddler. Oh, and no criminal record. Story 38. I was working as part of a BA team in a house fire. We were in the converted roof space, which was being used for a bedroom. We were standing in the doorway as the heat from the fire was strong and stopped us progressing further. As we sat in the doorway, I just came over feeling very unwell. Something wasn't sitting right with me and I was feeling very sick. I said to my partner, let's get out of here, and as we were going down the stairs, we overheard the evacuation whistle. We dropped everything and bolted out of the house in time as the roof collapsed in and crushed the first and second floor beneath it, right where we were standing. We got out with such speed that my partner practically threw himself down the stairs face first and had a minor hairline fracture to his elbow. Well, if you like these stories, here's more. YouTube thinks you're going to love this. Catch you in that video.